Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video. I just got back from spending some time with my family and I made this beat yesterday. It's fire, it's drill, which is pretty unbelievable if I do say so myself. I don't usually make drill. In fact, this is probably the first completely original drill beat that I've ever made that's actually fire. I've listened to this more times than I care to admit. And I'm going to break it down for you here today. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so straight up, I think I'll explain the guitar first because I made the intro out of the guitar. So, this is from Expand. It is the Finger Nylon Acoustic preset, and it's playing this pretty simple pattern. Basically, we could break it down into a 2-bar loop as far as the chords are concerned. So, this first one here, we've got a very simple C minor triad because we're in the key of C minor. And the very distinct bounce that I have, we're in quarter beat here, but when you zoom in, there's obviously 4 sections to each beat. There's 4 sections to each beat, and if you just place a note each of these quarter beat sections, you get an interesting bounce that's not as orthodox as just doing a half beat or a third beat bounce. So yeah, this is every 3 quarter beats, this bounce, and then I've just got the root duplicated down an octave and duplicated up an octave as well, for a little bit more depth and dimension. And I've just duplicated this over for the second chord. This one's obviously a little bit shorter. And you can see that I've moved this D sharp down to a D, and this is called a suspended chord. And these work super well when it comes to dark melodies. Moving from a regular minor chord to a suspended chord, whether you're moving the third up or down a note in the scale, works super well. You should definitely try it out. And instead of using the root note here, I've actually used the 5th of the chord as the root note here to make it feel a little bit different, like we're moving somewhere, so that we're not playing the exact same chord over and over again. But obviously we've duplicated this top C over again. And then these chords are exactly the same. However, this second chord is another variation on this suspended chord. This suspended triad is the exact same. However, I've again changed the root note and the top note that I'm playing. This is technically part of the melody, but we can include it here as well. I've used this suspended note as the bass melody for a little bit of variation. So we've basically taken one chord and turned it into 3 chords. So we've got the first chord, we've got the suspended chord, and then we've got the first chord again, and then we've got a variation of that suspended chord with a different root note. That's a very simple way to get great sounding chord progression. So just play around with suspended chords and changing the root note under just the one in the scale. It'll spice things up lovely for you. That's not really a good sentence, but you know what I mean. Yeah, and the melody just repeats a 4-bar loop. So we've got this roll here. I basically just placed a quarter note. Alt U to bring up the chopper. And you can play with this time knob to decide how many chops you want. I've just got the quarters there. And then I played with the velocity, as you can see down here. So it's fading into the G, which is the 5th. I talk about this in a lot of my tutorials. Using notes that are already in the chords that are playing is an easy, surefire way to make fire melodies. I just used fire twice, but that's okay. So we start on the G, the 5th of the chord, repeat it with a passing tone down to the D sharp, which is the 3rd, as you can see in this chord here. And then as we move into the second chord, the suspended chord, the 3rd of the suspended, or technically it's the 2nd of the scale, is this D, which you can see in this chord here as well. So that covers the melody for the first 2 chords. And then we've got the same melody here passing down into the D sharp without the roll. So this is the exact same. And then this, as I mentioned before when I was explaining the chords, goes back up to the F for a little bit more variation. And that is just duplicated exactly over another 4 bars. I just realized I accidentally deleted that C. Now that we've gone through the pattern, it sounds like this. Also, one final note is before I added in the melody for these chords and specifically, Alt R randomize the velocity and the panning very slightly, not too much pan, but a little bit of velocity. And that brought a whole nother dimension of life to the guitar. This preset without the randomized velocity sounds very flat. So if that's one thing that you don't do with your guitar melodies, definitely randomize the velocities. And for the effects, I've just got an EQ cutting out the low end to make room for the bass, as we always do. I've got a stock fruity chorus turned down to about 50% mix level. I've just got a bass reverb here. I haven't actually touched this much at all. I think I bumped up the wet level a tiny bit, but apart from that, it's untouched. And then I've got a tremolator in this Premiere MIDI preset. This just means it's more on time than the default preset, I find. And I've got it playing a quarter note rhythm. The depth is at 100%, but I actually turned down the mix level to about 20-25% so that it wasn't too obvious, but it gives it a little bit more groove in a more subtle way. So that's super fire. That's my basic guitar, and I've actually duplicated this into another layer. So we have all these basic effects here. We have the EQ, the chorus, the reverb, and the tremolator, all the exact same settings. A quick way I did that is you right click on the mixer track that you want to copy, you go to file and then save mixer track state as, click and drag it onto whatever other mixer track that you want to put those effects on. So I did that, and then I added a gross beat with a classic halftime. You go to momentary and then half speed. And that sounds like this. And now for the intro, something I did is I automated this reverb in with 100% wet with the decay time up quite high and a little bit of stereo separation on it to really drown it out. And obviously this filter to cut out a lot of the highs. I wanted the focus to be in the 100 to 500 hertz range to make it sound like you're sort of outside a building or a club that's playing the music. You really only sort of get this frequency range around about. So that's what this sound reminded me of. I've just automated the mix level coming into the intro. And finally, this audio file here, all I did is I went onto this guitar track here. I used a Deep Blue tape stop. I got this effect from Tri-Freeze, actually. Super fire producer on YouTube. I think he's got like 40k subs now, so shout out to him. If you want to go check him out, I'll leave a link in the description. But you probably already know who he is anyway. I'll turn the slowdown here to about as low as it can go. And then you create an automation clip. And then you basically just turn the trigger on like this. Click and record it. And you'll see it'll slowly turn off like that. And then basically all you need to do is grab the file, reverse it, level it, and then drag it to the front of your song. And you've got this super cool reverse tape stop effect. Another thing I did is I just added this transition. This is from Tri-Freeze's pack as well. Just regular transition. And another riser, this is from Cody's 2021 go-to drum kit. This riser I use in a lot of my beats, and a lot. You'll probably notice it more and more now that I've pointed that out. But this is what the intro sounds like. Alright, so moving on into the pre-hook and the hook and the rest of the song for that matter. Got this drill counter snare from Ocean's Drill Essentials pack. You've probably seen me use this in a couple of my other drill videos. Sounds like this. And I've just got it playing this very basic drill hi-hat pattern. And that just repeats. Super simple. Got this basic chop snare. Playing the standard drill snare pattern. I really love the delayed. Adds so much more bounce. But yeah, that's pretty basic. Next I added like another counter snare. This is from Ocean's Drill Essentials pack as well. More of a rim. I just use this to add more bounce. It definitely plays back and forth with the main drill snare. Continuing with the percussion and stuff of that nature, we've got open hat. This one's the lab hi-hat from Tri-Freezer's pack. In fact, 90% of the sounds I've used are in free drum kits, so don't think that you have to buy expensive drum kits or spend a lot of money on drum sounds to get good sounding drums. Pretty basic. One thing I did do is pitch it up 2 semitones, but this is the pattern for the opener. It follows the main snare for the most part, but I did just remove, I believe, a snare hits around here. Then I've just got this sword sound, very standard drill perk. That's from Ocean's drill pack as well. Displaying a very simple pattern also. Now, moving on to the meat and potatoes, the kick and the 808. I've actually got 3 808 patterns and 3 different 808s for the entire beat, actually, which is interesting. But first, we'll move on to the kick, which is quite simple. This is the RGB kick from Cody's 2022 go-to drum kit. The RGB kick, I use this a lot. This one punches like hell, but one thing I did in this mix is what I don't usually do with this kick is I boosted it and clipped it in this pre-computed effects here, just to give it a little bit more distortion, because I think that suited the vibe a little bit more. But it's just playing this very basic pattern. Now, one producer rule, not that there really are any rules, is don't use too many kicks. And you can see I've completely violated this rule for this beat, but I think it sounds fine nonetheless. Not necessarily on its own, but the kick never really plays without an 808 in the beat. So if anything, its role is to emphasize the 808 in this beat. So it's not really overbearing in that sense. I've also turned the velocities right up so that it slaps. I'll also do that on the snare as well, because usually those are the drums and the instruments that you want at the forefront of your mix. All right, so moving on to the 808s. The first 808 I've got, I guess we'll go with this basic one. This is Ocean's Drill 808. This is the second one in his free kit. Sounds like this. This one sounds so gritty, so dark, so dirty. I loved it. So this is the basic 808 pattern, playing a lot of the root note. And in fact, a lot of the 5th as well. G is the 5th in this scale, and C is the root note. We've got C in 3 octaves. Something I've done as well is automated the velocities. Not automated, but changed the velocities to get some movement in there. Especially these high notes, we don't want them hitting at max velocity, otherwise they sound too loud. We've got this 808 roll at the end here too. And something else that I've done is the panning. Just on this study here, it sort of goes from left to right, but it's also spreading out further and further as it plays, even though there is only 4 notes in this case, but it definitely adds a whole nother element. That sounds fire. Let me go ahead and play. This is what this pattern sounds like. And in this instance, the end doesn't actually play, but the end is very, very similar to the second pattern. In fact, not much has changed. I think I just removed some notes for the hook, because I also, this is the same 808, by the way, because I also used another 808. This is a different 808. This is Ocean's Drill 808 number 19. Sounds like that, not as deep, not as gritty. And I use that one mainly for the slides, pretty much exclusively the slides, because I thought that this 808 sounded much better when I did the slides with this one. So originally, all of this was in this pattern. So you can see that's quite busy. And in fact, a level above the first 808 pattern I saw you for the pre-hook. So this is the 808 pattern in its entirety playing for the hook. However, the red notes are playing the second 808 and the green notes are obviously for this 808. So for the hook, we've got both of those playing back and forth, sort of like a call and response type thing. And yeah, together sounds like this. Something I also forgot to mention that became quite apparent to me here is I panned the first lot of slides left and right here as well for a little bit more variation. For me, when I hear pan drill 808s, especially slides, I think pretty much exclusively slides, it sounds super fire. And that's probably my favorite element of this beat is the panned 808s. But the final instrument for this beat is the Best Zay 808. This is from Trophies' free pack as well. This smacks, this 808. And also, I just threw a soft clipper on here with the threshold down and the post turned back up so the gain was about the same to sort of capture some of that punch and thump that the original sound has, but the original sound's actually clipping, and when you turn it down, it sort of loses a little bit of that distortion, so that's why I threw the soft clipper on there. But this is a very, very basic 808 pattern as well. It's got a very traditional bounce. One thing I like doing in my beats is on the one having the 808 playing an octave above and then dropping down to the root octave, or the octave that sounds best for the 808. So it's got a pretty traditional bounce. It sort of follows the kick pattern that you heard a few patterns ago, and it basically is from the octave above to the octave below for a little while, and then towards the end here we go back to the octave above, and then we just follow the descending tone of the melody, and adds another layer to the end of each 4 bars. And for the final touch, when I arrange this beat out, we've got the intro here with the automation of the reverb and the filter. Then we've got just the unfiltered guitars here, both the gross beat and the original guitar. Then we've got the pre-hook, which I've cut out a bar and about 3 beats here. Whenever this last 808 finishes, I've cut it off here to drop into the hook, which the first 8 bars doesn't have the kick, which is something I do in almost every one of my beats. And then something I did for this beat, which I do for most of my beats as well, is before the second half when the kick comes in, I have a bar of almost emptiness. Almost every drum sound is cut out except for the 808, especially the roll and the slide, and obviously the guitar as well, to build a little bit of an anticipation for the drop into the main part of the hook. And then after the hook, in the first 8 bars of the verse, we've transitioned to the second 808, and I've actually left the first kick on the 1 in to give it a little bit more emphasis and a bit more punch. And I've actually got a filter automation on the counter snare that you might have realized a bit earlier. It's cutting out a lot of the highs, so it sort of fades in and builds an energy as we get further into the verse. So we go from guitar with counter snare being filtered in with the 808 to just the unfiltered counter snare, or the hi-hat as I guess we could call it in this case, the snare and the guitar, and then we build back into the pre-hook, which is pretty much the exact same as it is here, but I've just added the kick in here for a little bit of variation. And then the hook is the exact same that I've just copied over here. So that's the arrangement. Pretty simple, pretty fire. I've just added some transition effects throughout the verse and the hook. But yeah, that's going to be it. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you liked the video, like the video. Subscribe if you want to see more content. Hit the bell notification to be notified next time I post a video. If you learned something, leave a comment. Let me know what it was. And if you think this is a good beat and you think I should make more drill, let me know. Super happy with how this one came out. But yeah, that's going to be it. I'll catch you in the next video. Stay safe, stay healthy, drink water, eat good food, get lots of sleep, and I'll see you in the next video. I love you.